Hey, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Today we are checking out a very versatile and powerful master bus processor. Today we're looking at the xmax master bus processor from Elysia. Now this is a stereo rack mount unit that allows you to totally take charge of the final basic processing on your stereo mixes. It's going to be ideal for mixing. It's great for mastering and can also be used in live sound applications as well. As we'll see, it's very powerful in that it not only gives you control over the frequency balance of your mix, but also of stereo width, stereo imaging, some of the tones, as well as basically some of the dynamic processing as well. So this is one of three formats for the xmax. There's also a 500 series module, and there's what they call a cube, which is a desktop format module for this as well. But the rack makes it very easy to see what's happening with our two channels here. As I mentioned, this is a stereo device. There are both XLR as well as balanced quarter-inch connections on the back, and there's actually two sets of outputs on the back, so if you need to route somewhere else, you can do that as well. So those connections are very straightforward, very simple. Just route from your audio source through this. Now you'll probably want to put this pretty close to last in your chain, although it can also be useful for processing individual tracks or submixes, say of drums. You might want to run bass through this before you do your final mix or whatever. It's a very powerful processor that can be used in a lot of different situations. The xmax features Class A discrete circuitry. And the way that it's set up is your signal comes in and then it's basically split into mid-side. So we've got a center signal and then we've got our side signal. Now additionally, that center signal, or mid signal as it's referred to, is split into low frequency and high frequency, and then we have a completely independent processor that runs on each of those three things. So we have a separate compressor on the lows, separate compressor on the mids, and then a separate compressor that runs on the sides. Now we can link the three of those together, as we'll see, but there are individual controls for them as well. So let's take a tour of the front panel, and some of what this can do will become more apparent as we look at that and listen to some examples. But beginning on my far left, we have the three threshold controls for the individual compressors. So we have the low threshold, mid threshold, and then the side threshold as well. Now when the compressors aren't linked, those are each processing their individual sections of the audio, if you will. But there's what's called VariLink here, and that's this control right here. And what this does is allow you to progressively link those three bands together. So as we turn that up, whichever one is compressing the hardest, has the highest threshold in most cases, is going to be the one that's the master for all three of those. But again, you can dial that in using this link control, which is such a cool feature, so you can set the linking among those three bands. We have control over the crossover frequency between the lows and the mids, and this can range from 40 hertz up to 470 hertz. So you can really separate out just the sub lows, or you can actually get up into that low mid range as well if you like. We have a global release time control next up on the front panel that sets all three of the compressors' release time, and that ranges of course from very short release to a very long release. So you set that appropriately for your source material so that you're not getting pumping and breathing artifacts. Next up we have that link control, a VariLink control that I was talking about before. Following that we have three buttons. Hit it is basically our bypass switch. That engages the effect. Punch changes the compression ratio on the three compressors. So with the punch button deactivated, you're getting 1 to 1.45, so pretty gentle, pretty transparent compression. This isn't a heavy-handed compressor, it's more of a bus compressor that's designed to even things out, especially among those three different bands. When you push the punch control in, you go to a 1 to 2.55 ratio. That allows you to clamp down just a little bit harder, adds a little bit more punch. It's going to be ideal if you're working on drums in many cases or bass in many cases. And you might want that out when you're working on a full stereo mix. Low Mo is a very interesting control. When that's engaged, it engages a high-pass filter or low-cut filter on just the sideband. So you take the lows out of the sides, and what that does, it tends to focus that low end more to the center of your mix so it doesn't get washed out or spread out too much. So that's a very powerful command when you're working with an overall mix because it's going to tighten up that bottom end for you. We have separate meters for the three bands as well as for the soft clip, as we'll see. Now we have makeup gain for each band independently, so you can rebalance those three bands, the sides versus the mid versus the lows. As we'll see, that's very effective on the sides because it means we can change our stereo width by bringing those sides up or dropping them down, which is going to tend to push things back more towards the center. Our final section of the xmax's shape, and this is where we find the tone control. This is an overall high frequency shelf, minus 8 dB to plus 8 dB, so it just opens up that air and those top frequencies, the brightness of your signal. We've got a control for the amount of soft clipping. Now this soft clipping is going to round out sharp transients, and this is surprisingly effective for allowing you to raise the overall level. You drop those transients down with just a little bit of soft clipping, and you'll be surprised how much more dynamic range you can gain back. But you can actually push this up beyond that to the point where you're getting into pretty heavy saturation, and that may be useful when you're running this on drums or on individual tracks, even on a vocal perhaps. Finally, we have our overall output level control. So let's run a mix through the xmax and listen to what some of these controls can do, what the xmax can do for us. We're going to start out with the mix dry.
Reach down, hold the sound, feel light, super tight, smile once, and then again.
Now I'm going to engage the xmax. What I want you to listen for is, first of all, how the sides come up, so the stereo width changes, but also how we're adding a little bit of brightness on the top end. We're rounding out those transients just a little bit. I think you'll agree that it sounds like a more polished mix with better stereo imaging than when it started out. So here's our dry signal.
Reach down, hold the sound, feel light, super tight, smile once, and then again. Sweeter things are in the air, happiness is everywhere. Music maker, rhythm taker.
I'm really happy with the results running through the xmax. Let's look at some of the individual things that are happening there. So I'm going to leave this engaged. Let's go ahead and set all of our gains back to 0, so we're not adding any makeup gain. I'm going to turn my thresholds all the way up, so we're not getting any processing. We'll set our frequency to about 140 hertz. I'm going to leave our release set fast. I'm going to leave the linking off. We'll turn our soft clip off and our tone back to 0. Here's our dry signal.
Reach down, hold the sound, feel light, super tight, smile once, and then again. Sweeter things are in the air, happiness is everywhere.
So at this point, we're not adding any processing at all. I'll engage and bypass the unit. You'll hear that it's exactly the same signal going out as it's coming in.
Reach down, hold the sound, feel light, super tight.
Now let's start doing some processing. First, we'll start setting our thresholds for our 3 individual bands.
Reach down, hold the sound, feel light, super tight, smile once, and then again. Sweeter things are in the air, happiness is everywhere. Music maker, rhythm taker.
Now, not a lot of change happening there. Of course, at this point, we're adding some compression, as you can see, especially on the transients. I'm going to bring up some soft clipping so we can hear that, and then we'll start playing with the relative gains of those 3 different sections.
Reach down, hold the sound, feel light, super tight, smile once, and then again. Sweeter things are in the air, happiness is everywhere.
So we're just touching that soft clipping there. We're rounding out some of those transients just a little bit. Now let's change those relative gains.
Reach down, hold the sound, feel light, super tight, smile once, and then again. Sweeter things are in the air, happiness is everywhere. Music maker, rhythm taker.
Isn't it interesting the way you can affect that stereo imaging by using that side control? We can bring up those background vocals and those whispered effect vocals in there. You can really balance those against the center image that we're developing, and by bringing that down, we can make the center even stronger and bring it forward.
sound, feel light, super tight.
So in that case, we become much more mono in our mix. If we flip our controls the opposite direction, we'll suddenly jump to a much wider stereo mix.
Reach down, hold the sound, feel light, super tight. Smile once, and then again. Sweet.
Now we can use our tone control to shape the brightness and the air on top of our mix.
Reach down, hold the sound, feel light, super tight. Smile once, and then again. Sweeter things are in the air.
Now one other thing we can do to really stabilize our mix is to drop the low frequencies out of that side signal using the low-mo switch.
Reach down, hold the sound, feel light, super tight. Smile once, and then again. Sweeter things are in.
Then if necessary, we can compensate by bringing up the low frequencies here in our gain controls. The final control is punch. We're not going to hear a huge amount of change here with our overall mix, but it is increasing the ratio, and so we're compressing just a little bit harder when we use that.
Reach down, hold the sound, feel light, super tight. Smile once, and then again.
Now we can see from our meters that our three bands are operating completely independently as far as the compressors are concerned. They're jumping at different times and so on. If we increase that Verilink control, the master band, whatever that might be, whichever one is compressing has the highest threshold, is going to be the one that controls the other two.
Reach down, hold the sound, feel light, super tight. Smile once, and then again. Sweeter things are in the air. Happiness is everywhere.
Now when we have that Verilink control all the way up, basically this is operating as a stereo classic VCA style compressor, but we still do have that independent gain control. We still have our other features here, the low-mo control, the tone control, the soft clipping, and so on. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the xmax Master Bus processor from Elysia. Very, very versatile unit that allows you to shape your tones, whether you're working with single tracks, all the way to full mixes, live, studio, mastering. It's going to be useful in so many different applications. For complete information, head over to sweetwater.com, contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. They'll be happy to fill you in. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater.
Hold the sound.